best known beats best. You can be the best, but the person who's going to be best known, they're going to get the calls and they're going to get the cases, and they may be an inferior lawyer, unfortunately. I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer.
This is Jessica, Head of Coaching Strategy at Crisp, and today we're flipping the script for another special edition episode to get Michael's take on how to cut through the noise and make your firm impossible to ignore, why expertise alone isn't enough anymore and what actually drives authority, and why more budget isn't always the answer.
All spend does is either reach more people or reach more people more frequently. But if your targeting isn't right, if your messaging isn't right, if everything downstream from a conversion standpoint isn't right, then you can be spending more money and the platforms will take it, right? Like if you give Facebook or Google money, they'll spend it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to convert into cases.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. All right, Michael, AMMA.
AMMA, what a time to be alive.
It is.
We were just talking about this before we started recording, and I was like, let's just start recording so we can keep talking about it. But what a time to be alive. What an exciting time. And look, I know that not everything is perfect, and there's all sorts of things going on in the world, but just the pace of just change and innovation that's taking place, like what an exciting time. And you think 10 years from now, you got self-driving cars.
Yeah, we say this all the time. We don't think our girls will ever drive.
No, absolutely.
It's just a different, it's wild to think about.
I think you'll drive in the same way that if you want to, right? Meaning that you can go to the racetrack or something like that. If there's people that will still enjoy that, of course. I would enjoy that.
The norm.
It won't be the norm when it comes to transportation anymore because it'll likely be much safer to just get an autonomous vehicle, and especially when all the other vehicles are autonomous as well. And just fascinating. It's not just that. I mean, we were talking about this back when we were in, back when we were in school, middle school.
Many young, innovative people on the team here. So aging myself a little bit with that one, but just the difference of what, I remember being in middle school, having to take a typing class, and we were like, why are we taking typing classes? Nobody uses computers, and didn't really use computers throughout high school.
Mavis Beacon.
Hey,
Oregon
Trail.
Do you know who you're sitting across from right now?
Are you the world's champion of Mavis Beacon?
I was the typing champion at Northwestern Middle School, okay?
Of course you were.
Yes. I had the fastest words per minute.
Of course.
Right? Because we were all sitting there learning to type. And there was Mavis Beacon who would help to teach you QWERTY, QWERTY, right? On the keyboard, that sort of thing.
Yes. But it's wild because I didn't have a laptop in college. And that's so everyone here that's younger, I was like, what? I had dial-up in college. It was just a totally different time.
Oh, yeah. We had to, I begged my family, my parents for a second phone line.
Oh, yeah.
So, because if you were online, and this was America Online.
Dial-up.
That sent probably 10 billion CDs to people's homes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So you could just get hours. But essentially, once you dialed up and you were logged into America Online, if somebody called your house and you answered the phone,
it would
disconnect you.
Yeah.
So this is why people would get a second phone line. The phone line would be for their computer, the internet, and then the other would be for calling. Speaking of calling, this is when people would call your house.
A landline.
And say, is Michael there?
Yeah.
No, Michael's not here.
Yeah. And go way back before caller ID even.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd have to remember numbers. You'd have to remember all your friends' numbers. So it's funny. I still remember them.
Yeah.
There's a handful that I still remember. I remember the phone
same.
numbers that where I grew up, the house I grew up in. But it's just No different than if you get in the car, there was no Google Maps.
No.
You'd have to print out the maps.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, again, there's going to be people listening saying, we were around before you could even print out the maps.
Correct.
But I'd have like a stack of papers in the glove box of all the places I'd gone, because you're trying to follow along, right? MapQuest of like turn left here, turn right here. And then I'd also print out like the return.
For sure.
You know, because you could just like, oh, just reverse the other ones. I'm like, no. Like, you give me the return directions as well.
Good thing most of our audience will relate to this. Most of our team might not, but it's okay.
I mean, think about it right now. Let's say your phone died, right? And let's say you didn't have GPS in your car and you were on your way to somewhere that you'd never been before. Like, you're screwed.
Yes.
It's no different than, but let's say the power goes out in your house, right? You got a smart home. I joke about this sometimes, but it did actually happen.
It did.
Right? And there was, so we live on a street where the power line infrastructure is not so great. City of Atlanta, okay? Insanity. But I remember when we first moved to that street and the power went out, and I looked outside and I'm like, okay, all of our power's out, but all of our neighbors, their lights are on. What's going on here? Did the power just selectively go out at our home? And it was because they all had generators, right? So I'm like, all right, we got to do something about this. I don't want to be in a situation ever again where the power could just go out randomly every couple of weeks,
right? And
I can do absolutely nothing about it. And because we have like smart home stuff, it's like the cameras don't work, even like the baby cams.
Yeah.
So we couldn't watch the girls. Like, even the doors don't open. I'm basically a slave of my own home. When the power goes out, I can't do anything, right? I can't even leave, and I can't enter. So we got the solar and the batteries, the Tesla Powerwalls. And now, when the power goes out, I'm like pumped up, because I'm like, this thing, with the Powerwalls that we have, we can have power to the home for about 3.5 days, and that's if the sun didn't come out at all. And the lights don't even flicker. The internet stays on, and we even did backup on the internet too, because I was like, we had that experience with AT&T, where our landscapers came out, they cut the fiber line because AT&T hadn't buried it for 6 months, right? So it's not the fault of the landscapers. And then I said, no big deal. We'll just invite out the AT&T, a technician to basically run a new line. But AT&T happened to go on strike for 2 months, so all of AT&T Southeast was not available. So then we said, all right, well, we're never going to let this happen again. So now we're going to have, backup internet and redundant internet. And now you can actually do like a Starlink.
Yeah.
So
what a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. No different than, last thing I'll say, and then we'll get to the questions. But I'll tell you one of them, like, there's certain moments in technology where you're like, okay, this is cool. There was 1 year ago where, I mean, we've all had the experience of like something and we buy it on Amazon, a few hours later, same day, it's delivered to your home, and you're like, I just got this totally random thing delivered to my house. That's amazing. Then there's, oh wow, like the first time you experience DoorDash or Uber Eats, and somebody thinks that's amazing. Now we're like, yeah, whatever, right? And then there's like self-driving cars, where I got in the car and I put in these instructions or whatever the directions were, and I didn't have, like, when we went to the lake over the holiday, it went all the way there, highway, turns, stopping, everything. Now, I still had to sit in the driver's seat, but I didn't touch anything. And our kids in the back, girls, are like, whatever, right? They don't think it's anything special. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. But the real, like, just like thinking this is so cool was when we went on the Ritz-Carlton yacht trip, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the first time we went, if you've ever been on a boat, like on a ship somewhere, and you're in the middle of the ocean, you'll realize that the internet connectivity is not so great, okay? So similarly to how it used to be on planes, right? Like, just there's times where you have spotty Wi-Fi and it's just not that great. Right. So maybe you can do like emails, but really not much else. Well, the second time we came back, and then we went with our, with some of our coaching members, they got Starlink. So we are in the ocean, like in the middle of the ocean, pitch black, darkness everywhere. You cannot see in any direction. I don't know where the hell we are, right? And it's like the middle of the night. And I'm playing with my buddy Call of Duty, and we are like slaying fools, right? And I'm on this ship, like I'm looking out into the ocean, and I have like zero latency. So it's like, it's not like some laggy thing. It's like fast. And I'm like, this is cool. I'm on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and I'm playing some guys somewhere else in the country, and I'm on my mic, and I'm like, that's cool. I even told them, like, I was playing with some guys, I'm like, you guys aren't going to believe this, but like right now, I'm in the middle of the ocean. They're like, nah, man, we don't believe you, right? Like, you're just making that up. And I'm like, okay, maybe I am making it up.
You just outed yourself?
Yeah.
How obsessed you are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to work on those skills, So anyway,
Back to the
What
AMMA.
a time to be alive. All right. People say they like these before we start. So if you don't, you may just fast forward. That's okay too. So this is the AMMA. You guys submit your questions. We answer them here on the show. You can submit them by texting us at 404-531-7691. Jessica compiles the questions. We answer them on the show. And we also do our interview style podcast. We bring on a guest. We ask them questions. We got the encore editions, some of the most popular episodes. We bring those back too. We don't run any ads. We ask that if you enjoy the podcast in any way, if it makes you laugh, it makes you cry, that you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people, get more guests on the show, and reach more like-minded leaders like yourself. But now, Jessica, it's time for the questions.
All right. Now that we got those thoughts out. So question number 1, Michael, I know I'm great at what I do. And when I get in front of the right people, they hire me. The problem is actually getting them to notice me in the first place. I try to post on social media, but it feels like people are scrolling past me. How do I get potential clients to actually pay attention? Great question.
Yeah, here's the $1 trillion question. People are drowning in content, and wherever they go, there's like no shortage of ads that they see. I mean, I think people are exposed to almost like 5,000 advertisements or more every single day.
That's crazy.
And anytime they pull up these platforms, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, etc., X, etc.,
Yes.
X gonna give it to you. Exhibit. Pimp my ride.
Right. I got you.
Put a hot tub in the back of an Oldsmobile. All right. So wherever.
Also aging ourselves with that one.
Yeah. Topic for another podcast. But because people are drowning in content, it's like, how do you stand out? But you have to answer that question, right? Like for yourself. So what I would look at is, if you know and you believe that you provide valuable services and you're an expert at what you do, as you've described, and it sounds like if you can get in front of the right people, which means typically if you get a prospective client on the phone, you will sign them up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question becomes, how do you even get their attention in the first place? And if they are drowning in content wherever they go, you have to think about, well, what is going to help you stand out and differentiate in some way that is going to capture their interest and be valuable to them? Because you can put out all sorts of different types of content. Like you could post, I don't know, like random graphics like, hey, today's President's Day or whatever. And you're like, I don't give a shit. Scroll, right? Or your content's not even going to show up because a lot of these social media platforms are going to prioritize content that's engaging in the feed. So meaning that, think about it from the standpoint of, if you are the social media platform, your goal is to keep users on the platform for as long as possible. Like you want them to keep scrolling. You do not want them to leave. Because if you can keep them on the platform, then you can show them more ads. And ads are what pay for everything that you do, and it's how you make money. And you're not going to be able to display as many ads if not as many people are on the platform, or if they're on there for a shorter period of time. So the goal is, they want to keep you there. And the way they're going to keep you there is by showing you content that is relevant to you, or that is going to be interesting, polarizing, engaging in some sort of way, right? It could be things that you like, a story about how grandma was saved, or it could be something that you really don't like, maybe something political that rubs you the wrong way, right? But it's going to engage you in some way where you're going to stay on there and you're going to keep scrolling. This is how I saw a bunch of lawyers arguing about something political, and it was like a Facebook post, and it had like 300 replies, and they're going back and forth. And all I could think of was like, is this what they're doing all day, right? And then by the end of it, because I was like, let me just see how the whole thing ended. Nobody was convinced, right? No one changed anybody's mind.
It's a lot of energy.
Right? But Facebook loves that.
Yeah.
They love that. They love to see you beefing, right? Because that person was probably getting notifications on their phone every time there was another comment. They came back, they responded, and they're like, okay, great engagement. We like that, right? So back to the content piece. What type of content can you create that's going to be valuable to your audience? And I'm not saying you have to do anything weird, and you don't have to do dancing, and you don't have to wear like costumes and, ride a motorcycle through like a blazing, like a ring of fire or something like that. Although that would be engaging, but it may not be your brand, and it doesn't have to be. Like it doesn't mean you have to market to the lowest common denominator, right? Like if you provide true value and you say you want discerning clients, then it's thinking about, how could people get to know us, like us, and trust us, right? We've seen many of our firms have a lot of success by showcasing what they're doing in their community, right? So they'll show off when they're giving back, right? In any way, like they'll document it somehow, whether they're raising money for charity, whether they're just handing out backpacks, whether they're participating in something that's localized to the community, like they're, I don't know, let's say they're Mardi Gras, right? And they participate in the parade, right? And they have their own float, something like that. I'm giving an example. Or let's say they sponsor a sports team, whether it's a high school or even a college team, and then they'll create content along with that team and those players, right? And then they'll give out tickets to their clients, and then to even prospective clients, to people in their audience. So you can support your community locally. I think that's a great way to do it. You could also create content on your area of expertise. It depends who your audience is. So if your audience is other lawyers, then you want to make sure that content is displayed to other lawyers. If it's like something very specialized about, some sort of trial skill or something, other lawyers are going to love that. Somebody who's not a lawyer might be like, I don't give a shit. Think about it. Let's say it was your dentist, right? And they were providing you what in the news feed, you're like, okay, well, some dentist is talking about how to do root canals. And you're like, I don't care. Unless you are considering doing a root canal or becoming a dentist that does root canals. Consider your content, if you're like B2C, like meaning that like your business to consumer, what content's going to be interesting to them? Maybe it's your perspective on certain laws or regulations, right? Right now, like depending on the timing of this podcast, right, there's discussions around tort reform. So you could share your perspective on that, or things that people need to know. Or let's say you're a criminal defense attorney and there's a holiday coming out, or coming up where people are going to be doing a lot of drinking, things that people should know in terms of, one, don't drink and drive. That's an obvious thing. But it's like, but if you get pulled over, okay, don't do X, Y, and Z, right? Because they know their audience, right? Or you can share things like client testimonials, where people share, your clients share stories of how you've impacted them and how you've helped them. So there's the emotional side of it. But I think the biggest thing really comes down to, if you can see how everybody else is marketing, and especially how other lawyers and law firms are marketing in your community, do something different. Because if you market in the exact same way, then you're just going to blend in with them. And it doesn't mean, again, you have to do something like totally crazy. Like you don't have to make yourself look ridiculous. And there's some lawyers that do that sort of thing, and maybe it works for them, right? But if that's not your brand, you can market in a very sophisticated way and in a quality way. I mean, you can also start a podcast. You can interview local community leaders, right? You can and talk about what they do and learn about them, and you can build trust that way. So, but the point is that you should really be intentional about where you're posting, who you're posting to, what the content is, and then get feedback from it. So if you're posting a bunch of content, nobody's engaging, nobody's responding, nobody's really watching the stuff, then that's probably a sign that the algorithm isn't really prioritizing that content because it's not very relevant. So try something else. And then you can look and measure and say, all right, well, when I talk about cooking, right, people become, seem more interested in that than when I talk about, trial skills. And then someone say, well, how's that going to help me get more cases? Why would, while we're talking about cooking, get me more cases? But if the people who are interested in cooking could potentially have a legal issue, and you can reach a lot of the people interested in cooking, and it's something you are passionate about, for example, and you love to do. We have a client that actually does this sort of thing, and provides like legal education while cooking meals. Then you can build a great audience and a great community, and those people can ultimately become clients of yours.
Exactly. Yeah, so you got to get creative.
That's right. I was just going to say, you got to be creative.
All right, question number 2. I see some lawyers with these huge followings, especially on TikTok, viral content and tons of engagement, but as a lawyer, they don't seem credible. Meanwhile, there are experts out there who have been in business for decades but can't get noticed. Does real expertise even matter anymore? Yes
and no. Yeah. And you asked the question, so I want to give you a real answer. The answer you want to hear is that all those influencers are bullshit, and you're legit, and you do great work, and
that's enough.
And that's enough. But the unfortunate truth is that expertise is valuable. But if you can't get known and you can't get noticed, then your expertise can't help anybody.
The best cases go to the best marketers.
The best cases go to the best marketers. And they should go to the best attorneys. But the only way they go to the best attorneys is when the best attorneys become the best marketers.
Yep.
So first of all, I'll also go back a little bit. And if you see these legal influencers online that have a ton of followers and a ton of engagement, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing well financially. I've talked to a lot of them, and many of them, if not most of them, are not doing well financially. Yes, they have a social following, but sometimes that doesn't always materialize into cases, or it doesn't materialize into high value cases. Just because someone can put out some funny TikTok videos doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting semi-truck cases.
Right.
Because the people that are getting the semi-truck cases, in my experience, are the ones that put out content to other lawyers on trucking in general. They are best-selling authors. They have podcasts. They put out webinars. They present at conferences. They speak, and their best cases come by way of referral from other lawyers and sometimes clients as well. So the first thing is you don't really know how somebody's doing just because they have a large social following. And I would say that there's generally not much of a correlation between the number of likes and engagement that somebody gets and the number of cases they get. It could just mean that they're popular. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have over 600,000 followers on TikTok.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not very active on that platform. But I can tell you of the 600,000, very few are even law firm owners.
Correct.
And we only work with lawyers. And how do we get so many followers? Well, we've had a number of guests on this podcast that are very well known and, like, let's say, are in other industries and are just interesting people in general. Like, we've had David Goggins on, right? Like, David Goggins has been on this podcast, and he's been on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he's been on Huberman's podcast, and that's it. Like, basically, there's only a few places you can actually hear from David Goggins. So when we put up bits and clips of David Goggins, those became very popular. And then because we had so many different clips and a lot of different experts and speakers over the years, people liked that and they shared the content and they engaged with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that was law firm owners engaging, right? So it's, again, those numbers can look like big numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's bringing us clients, right? So just take that with a grain of salt. And you're like, okay, well, then why do it? Well, we were posting our content in numerous places, and those happen to be guests that we had on our podcast. So, and then also, as we started to see the engagement of the podcast go up, this helped us reach more people, and it also helped us book more guests, and it was a compounding effect altogether. So there's still benefit to it. It's just not always one-to-one. I don't even know what the question was at this point, Jessica. I'm going to be honest with you.
We answered it. We said, does the expertise even matter anymore?
Well, okay. So we'll close it up with this, right? People are going to laugh. They're like, somebody's like, working at the gym or driving, and they're like, they probably bust out laughing just now. If you got a laugh just now, please go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. But yes, the expertise matters, but it doesn't matter until they know that you exist first. Like, it is all about getting known. I've said this until I was like a purple. 7 conferences so far, right, that we've done, 7 Game Changer Summits. And I have said at every single one that best known beats best, right? You can be the best, but the person who's going to be best known, they're going to get the calls and they're going to get the cases. And they may be an inferior lawyer, unfortunately, right? I don't like it either. But if you can't get your name out there and you can't get your brand out there, then there's no way to convey that expertise. And if you actually believe in what you do and you believe in the people you help and you actually think what you do is a good thing and you've obviously worked very hard to develop this expertise, then you have a duty to invest in getting your name and your message out there. I don't like it either. Right? I never wanted to do any of the thought leadership stuff. I never wanted to do vlogs and bits and stuff. And when the team wants to film, I'm like, man, I just want to be left alone. I want to sit in my house, right? And I don't want to come out. I don't want to be known. I don't want to be famous. I don't care. Like it's fine. I just, as long as it's like you and the girls and we have our family and we do fun stuff, like that's great, and I love growing the business. But when you see our ads on social media and you see me talking about some topic or whatever it is, just recognize that the reason why we do it and the reason I do it is because we've now helped over 1,000 law firm owners. And I've seen what impact that's made in their lives, personally and professionally, and how it just transformed their entire law firm and how it's revitalized their relationships with their family. And it's enabled them to take vacations and trips and pay down debt and really do incredible things. And he said, okay, well, we want to reach more people. And no matter how great we are at what we do, more people can't find out about us unless we are going out there and reaching them. So that's why those clips are coming out there. And it's not because I'm trying to be some influencer. I'm not trying to be some thought leader. Somebody sent an email yesterday. I don't know if you saw this, from the website. And they asked if, they said they were a big fan of the podcast and the book, and if they could get an autograph, like an autograph picture. Like, I still don't know if this is real, right? But that's what the email said. And they included their address and everything. So maybe that'll end up on eBay. But I don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think you have to see it however you regard it, whether it's as a necessary evil or what. But if you believe in what you do and you want to make a greater impact, then you have to find ways to get known. So instead of looking at the so-called influencers and being so bothered by them, I'm saying they're not great lawyers. It's looking at from the standpoint of, if the great lawyers don't market, then all the consumers are going to see are the not great lawyers, and that's who they're going to go with.
Yeah, exactly. All right, to round us out with question number 3, Michael, I've thrown more and more money into PPC, LSAs, SEO, everything. But no matter how much I spend, I'm just not seeing the growth I need. I don't want to bleed money, but I also don't want to turn off these lead sources. What would you do?
What would Danny do?
Oh,
Right?
you got to love those books.
I got the books. Our oldest
Choose Your
daughter
Own
loves
Adventure.
it. The Choose Your Own Adventure. Danny has the power to choose, the P2C, and so Danny always wanted to be a superhero, and in these books, Danny has the most powerful power of all, which is the power to choose, that by changing his choices, he can change his outcomes. So throughout the book, like Danny has different scenarios where he's like this little kid going to school, and it starts off with, does he sleep in, right, while his mom's calling for him, right? Or does he get up and get ready, right? And if he sleeps in, then he's going to be rushed and he misses breakfast, and that impacts him later in the day. But if he gets up and gets ready, then he's able to have a great breakfast, and he remembers to pack his pet tarantula and bring food for him, right? So it all compounds. And you too have the power to choose. It is the most important power that there is. So you're saying, okay, I've been doing things like, all the acronyms, right?
Yes.
SEO,
A lot of ABCs
PPC,
in there.
ABC, XYZ, and LSAs, right? So you got the local service ads, pay-per-click, search engine optimization. Do you throw more money at it? You're saying you're not getting the results you want. This is a complicated answer, right? Because there's so many variables that could be at play that if you're trying to figure out what to do in this type of scenario, you have to figure out what's not working first, right? So first of all, if you're not getting the growth you want, it's like, well, what type of growth do you want? I mean, let's say the firm's grossing $1 million and you're wanting to do 20 million. So yeah, obviously there's a big delta there, right? And what you would do for that might be something different. You could also look at it from the standpoint of what is not working or is not working at the level you described. So, for example, maybe let's assume it is working, and that purpose of pay-per-click is to generate clicks. And let's say the clicks are generating leads. And when the leads happen, whether it's an email that you receive or a contact form or an actual phone call to your office, then it's a function of, okay, well, is everyone being responded to immediately, like within 5 minutes to an email? Like, or is everyone even on an intake process? Like, what's the quality of that? Like, let's dial that in, right? Are calls being missed? What's the wait time? Like, is every call being handled consistently and high quality? And then also, what's the conversion rate of the intake team? Couldn't even be a marketing issue. It could be just an intake issue. And then let's say you are getting the cases. Let's say intake's perfect, right? Because everyone's intake's perfect. Like, anyone who hasn't called their office, their intake is perfect.
Yeah.
So let's say it's all good. And then you are actually getting a ton of cases, but you're really not seeing the growth that you want because you're not seeing the impact in the bank, which really comes down to the length of time that you see, time on desk. And that could be an operational issue of just how quickly are people moving cases forward, right? Like in terms of every step in the process, because then that becomes collections and cash flow, right? So it can be a number of different variables, but you won't know until you can truly identify what the problem is. And instead of looking at it and saying, okay, so let's say it is marketing. If not knowing in terms of how much you are investing in PPC, maybe you do more, maybe you do less, right? You can also be spending a lot of money in pay-per-click, but you're getting clicks, but you're not getting leads because the page that you're taking them to isn't converting well, right? Or let's say you're doing LSAs and that cost continues to go up, but when people call in, again, back to intake. So it depends. But I think the first thing that you can really do without me coming over to your office and doing a comprehensive diagnosis, which is probably what you should do, or like someone like me, or just get to the root of the issue, is really figure out what specifically is not working, like being able to isolate it.
Yeah.
You could also come back to maybe you're just not spending enough money. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had people that, spend like $500 or $1,000 a month on their pay-per-click or on their SEO, or some guy, they found on the internet said, I'll rank you on page 1 for some shit that nobody searches for ever. They don't tell them that part, but they say, I'll rank you on page 1 in 30 days, right? And it's $500 a month because I'm in, Venezuela, or whatever. Maybe you're just not getting quality work done, or maybe you're not spending enough money, right? Because sometimes, for certain mediums, you have to be able to spend enough to make a meaningful impact and also get enough data back. And then maybe you're not spending enough over a long enough period of time. Like,
right.
You're saying it's not working. You say, how long have you been doing it? And you're like, I don't know, 6 weeks. Maybe that's not enough time. So you really have to isolate the specific variables of what is not working for you, because all marketing really is, if you really get down to it in terms of like marketing spend, like when you are investing additional resources like financially in marketing, it's just the amplification of a message. So all spend does is either reach more people or reach more people more frequently, right? But if your targeting isn't right, if your messaging isn't right, if everything downstream from a conversion standpoint isn't right, then you can be spending more money and the platforms will take it, right? Like if you give Facebook or Google money, they'll spend it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to convert into cases. Maybe you are getting cases, but you don't like the cases you're getting. Maybe you're getting leads, but you don't like the leads,
Yeah.
right? All of those are a factor of like messaging, also in terms of targeting audience, right? Like who's seeing this stuff. I mean, it's
So many variables.
this is kind of the irony of like, if you ever run like hiring ads, like job posting and hiring ads. So one of the things around hiring ads, there's rules, at least on Meta, like Facebook, is that you can't do age-based targeting, right? So you can't say, hey, exclude 80-year-olds,
Right.
right? That would be ageist,
Yeah.
right? So if we're hiring for a social media expert, I can't exclude 80-year-olds,
Yeah.
right? Unfortunately. That means that when you are, like, let's say, putting out hiring ads, there's going to be people of all ages that will see this stuff. And then there's also, like, other bits of targeting. Like, this is why you have to get good with this stuff. So you can narrow it geographically. You can also narrow it based on certain interests. You can also target people who have already visited your careers page on your website, for example. That can be much more specific. You can upload custom audience lists, right? When you have emails and phone numbers and addresses, and you can match them that way, right? But so there's so much that you can do, but none of it is going to make sense until you can figure out what is not working. And the first thing I would look at is, all right, so are we handling every single lead and every single intake perfectly? Rule that out first, because you don't want to spend more money and know that there's like a hole in the bucket of just being able to just inefficiently handling leads and cases, because you're just going to spend more and your cost of acquisition is going to skyrocket. It's just not going to make sense. So like make sure that's dialed in before you scale. And then once you figure that part out, then you can start looking at each platform and saying, okay, well, what are we trying to do here in terms of the quality of leads or the quality of cases, and start fine tuning. And you may reallocate budget from one thing to another, right? We've also talked about here, in this case, LSAs, pay-per-click. Those are very short-term drivers. They're very transactional in nature and from a marketing standpoint. There's not really a long-term focus there when it comes to brand building. And when you do brand building, that's really where you start to see higher value cases over time. You may reallocate your budget that way as well, because what does everybody want? They just want great cases. They just want great cases. They don't want bad cases. They don't want the shitty ones. They don't want the ones that are like going to be low value. They're like, I don't want to drive across the street for a whiplash, right? So of course you want the great cases, but you need to figure out the right marketing mix to be able to achieve that. And there's going to be certain types of marketing you can do that will keep the phone ringing today. And then there's going to be certain types of marketing that you'll do that's going to make the phone ring with the great cases that you want tomorrow. And if you don't ever invest in the latter, well, then you're never going to get there, and it's going to be just much more expensive, and you're going to be reliant on these transactional drivers like pay-per-click, like LSA, et cetera, and then maybe even SEO, because SEO is a great thing, don't get me wrong, right? But we talked about this on an earlier podcast of like, when's the last time we did a Google search? Because we've been using the AI. And then there's somebody who's going to say, well, what do you think the AI pulls from? And sometimes, but sometimes not. And sometimes, what we're seeing is sometimes it pulls from just reviews, or sometimes it evaluates credibility in a different way. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't even index a lot of those pages. So it's a different world.
It is.
But make sure you have a solid foundation first. Handle the intake. Figure that out. Make sure that that is not an issue. And if you're not sure how to do that, just call your office today and secret shop your own firm and see how it's being handled. Or go on your website and submit a contact form and see how long it takes for you to get a response.
Then that's your tip of the day. All right. See you next time.
All right.
You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney podcast with Michael Mogill. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that we can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of Michael's book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot Michael a text at 404-531-7691 and ask him any question you'd like. You might just hear the answer on the next episode. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it will help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.